Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Sorry I had to cut us short in the middle of the track there, but I thought we'd better get started as you're joining us from all over the world. We've got folks from Sweden, from Italy, from the UAE, from Tel Aviv, far away from India, and across the US and North America and Canada as well. But good afternoon and welcome. And welcome to what is coming more like the norm of webinars over the course of the last couple of months, and this is not going to disappoint like the previous ones have either. So this afternoon we're going to be talking about Circulytics. What is Circulytics? Well, as we prepare to meet some of the unprecedented economic challenges that we see, mainly caused by COVID-19, but even before that, and for a long time now, businesses have been starting to rethink their strategies, rethink their business models, their material sourcing, and try to become more resilient and stronger as a result. But we can't understand what good looks like if we can't measure it. Earlier this year, the foundation launched Circulytics, a circularity measurement tool that enables companies to measure circularity across their entire operation, to identify opportunities, but also to adopt or further embed circular practices. And over the course of the next 45 to 60 minutes, we're going to be hearing from some of those organizations that are using Circulytics and hearing from the team at the foundation around how they have got on with the tool so far and what the lessons they have identified. And hopefully that's for you to take away and potentially consider, or you might already be from an organization using Circulytics already. But before we get into that, a couple of notes on how best to get stuff out of the session this afternoon. Now, you'll all be webinar and Zoom aficionados by now. The session is being recorded, so if you miss any of it, there's any breaks in internet connections, it will be available to view afterwards. And of course, if any of your colleagues want to see it, or you think some of your colleagues see it, you can share it with them. The best way to communicate with the panelists today, now you can see at the bottom of your screen, you have a chat function and you have a Q&A function. If you want to put questions to the panelists today, or to pick up on any of the elements that we discussed, please put your question in the Q&A. We've got a team of very, very smart folks behind the scenes from the Foundation's data and analysis team, who'll be there on hand to answer your questions, but also pick out those ones to put towards the panelists as we speak. The chat is obviously there for you to start talking amongst yourselves, but it won't be monitored. So if you put questions for the panelists in the chat, they won't be picked up. So put your questions in the Q&A. So why is this important then? So as I mentioned, back in January 2020, the foundation launched Circulytics, our circularity measurement tool, which we made open source to allow organizations to measure where they were on their circular journey. This was done in part because of the demand that we were getting from the partners we were working with, but also, again, as I mentioned before, how do we quantify what good looks like? Since the beginning of this year, so over the last 6 months, we've now seen over 500 organizations sign up to use Circulytics. What's really encouraging to see is a lot of those sign-ups have been from organizations that sit outside the foundation's network. So when we were looking to design this, actually what we want to do is to generate a tool that allows everyone to try and understand where their organization, at that organizational level, sits on their journey towards a circular economy. So who's going to help us in this journey this afternoon? Well, I'm joined by 3 guests. The first of which I'd like to introduce now is Nikki. Nikki's from the MacArthur Foundation and is also been working on Circulytics. Nikki, are you there?
I am here, James. Hi.
Hey, how you doing? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm really well, thanks.
Good stuff. So come on, Nikki. You work in the team. Circulytics, what is it?
Well, I think you did a pretty good job at first introducing it, but to go into a bit more detail, basically the data metrics team, which is the team I'm in at the foundation, we've been thinking over the past year and a half, how do you actually measure progress towards the circular economy? And the first kind of product that we've launched out of this is Circulytics. It's an assessment for companies to measure how circular they are today so that they can set measurable targets and measure progress towards those targets moving forward. And as you said, it was developed in response to a huge demand from companies in our network. there were some existing methods out there in measuring material and product circularity, but what was really missing was an assessment for companies to understand more broadly what it means for a company to be circular. So we worked with a sounding board of about 30 companies in our network all of last year to really make sure that the methodology we came up with is grounded in company reality. And as you mentioned, we've had over 500 businesses sign up so far. About a quarter of these are large businesses with revenues over $1 billion annually, and about 3/4 are companies outside of our network. So it's really promising to see that we're meeting this broader demand than just in our immediate network. And most importantly, Circulytics is completely free to use. So all you have to do is go to circulytics.com and register as a business, and you can get going.
Excellent. So when we look at the tool, but how does it work? What are organizations going to be getting out of using something like Circulytics?
Yep, so it's an assessment of about 30 different indicator questions, and half of the assessment is called the enablers. And these are questions that are looking at the enabling conditions needed for businesses to transition to more circular ways of doing businesses. And we put this in the assessment because we recognize that most companies today are really very early in their transition to becoming more circular. So we wanted to reward those who are really laying the groundwork, because it can take a long time to actually see circularity in your outcomes in terms of material flows and services and energy, skills, systems, processes, and infrastructure, innovation, and external engagement. And I'll explain those a bit more when we have a look at the scorecard. And then the second part of the assessment is called the outcomes, which is more of a snapshot of how circular your business really is today. And I'll go into that a little bit as well in a minute. So the questions you get in the outcomes are really tailored to whatever industry you're in as a business. And as a result of going through this assessment, you get a one-page scorecard for your business with an overall letter score, as well as a breakdown across different themes of the assessment and industry level benchmarking, which uses anonymized data. And what companies can use this scorecard for is to identify blind spots in their approach to circularity, as well as opportunities for innovation, and have a benchmark of where they are today as a business to be able to set measurable targets and track progress, hopefully year on year. And then the industry level benchmarking allows you to kind of understand where you fit into the picture compared to peers in your industry. And it's also really useful for both internal and external engagement and communications, because you really want to bring your whole company on board and also your customers on board to the journey.
Nikki, I can tell that you are very much into this in a big way. This does, you're in the right spot. Okay, so why then is this important now?
Well, as you said, we can't achieve circularity until we can properly measure it. And so much work has been done by the foundation and other organizations to define what the circular economy looks like. And really put those definitions and frameworks in place. And now we're seeing this shift more towards implementation at the company and policy level. And specifically for companies, they really need to be able to measure what they're doing to effectively manage it. So Circulytics offers an independent and impartial assessment of where your company stands today. And as I mentioned, it provides this anonymized industry benchmarking as well. And we've done quite a lot of work to align Circulytics with other relevant reporting frameworks out there, such as GRI, CDP, and ISO, to help facilitate the ease of data collection and submission for Circulytics, because we completely understand that there's so many different reporting frameworks out there, and we don't want Circulytics to become just another burden, but it is completely focused on circular economy, and we think that's quite powerful as a tool.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, right? Because the sort of metrics landscape is very busy. And I think one of our colleagues put it is that what we wanted to do with Circulytics as well is to make sure that it was additive to the effort that was going on already, rather than subtractive or distractive. Yeah. So it's really important to see. And there's a couple of questions already coming in around how it compares to to the other sort of metrics that are out there. And so that's a good reminder, actually. If you do want to put questions to the panelists this afternoon, get them in the Q&A. The team will answer it as we go, but actually we can put some to the speakers in a minute, which is a nice segue as well to our other two guests that are going to join us this afternoon. Nikki mentioned just then that actually we're going to be seeing a couple of the scorecards this afternoon, and very bravely, well, maybe bravely, but two companies that we've got this afternoon. We have Marianne from Brambles, and we have Sam joining us from DS Smith, both of whom have said they're happy to share their scorecards with us this afternoon. So this is an exclusive for those tuning in. I think Sam was commenting the other day that actually even some people within DS Smith haven't had a chance to see this yet. So it's coming to you fresh today. But turning to our guests then, Marianne, Sam, good afternoon. Marianne, if I come to you first, tell us a little bit about yourself and Brambles for those online who won't have heard of you before.
Okay, hi James, hi everyone. So I'm Marianne Richeux. I'm working in the Zero Waste World team for Europe as a program lead at CHEP, who's a Brambles company. Brambles is not really known from the B2C world, but more in the B2B. So we happen to run for now 70 years the biggest B2B share and reuse model of tertiary and secondary packaging units.
Excellent. And Sam, DS Smith?
Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, hi everyone. So again, DS Smith, possibly an organisation a lot of people haven't yet heard of, but we're a packaging company, a heavily integrated packaging company with a circular business model. We have the recycling division, a paper division, and the packaging division. We're heavily circular ourselves, working in about 37 countries, predominantly Europe, but also North America as well.
Perfect. Well, it's great to have you both here this afternoon, and we're going to get straight into it then, I guess. Now, this is the bit where it could all go wrong. I'm going to try and share my screen. The intention is to try and share Bramble Scorecard first, Marianne, and I'm going to bring Nikki back in on this as well. So we're going to share this to start with. Let's see if this works.
Hey.
Almost. There we go. So here we go. Let's zoom in a bit so you can see. So Nikki, this is the Bramble Scorecard. So this is the product that they get from Circulytics. What are we looking at?
So on the top right-hand corner, you can see the overall score and then a breakdown of the enablers and the outcome score, which I was talking a little bit about before. So that's kind of the overall score is a summary, but probably the more useful information is in the score breakdown, where it says scorecard. So here you get more of a breakdown by the different themes. So in the enablers section, you have these 5 different themes, and Brambles have scored very well across all of them. So in strategy planning, there are questions like, is your strategy aligned with becoming more circular? And do you have measurable circular economy targets in place? Because it's really hard to kind of sell circular economy if it's not part of your strategy. Then in innovation, as circular economy is such a new area, innovation is really an important space to invest in. So we're asking here, to what extent are your innovation functions geared towards designing circular materials, products, and business models? Then you have people and skills. So there are questions about circular economy training that's offered, roles dedicated specifically to circular economy implementation, and then also how a circular economy strategy is communicated internally. Then systems, processes, and infrastructure. So this is looking at suitable IT and digital systems, processes for manufacturing and procurement, for example, and then infrastructure is your physical plant, property, and equipment assets. And all of these need to be in place to really make that transition. And then finally, you have external engagement. So I think we all know that you can't do this alone because the circular economy is really a systemic transition. So how are you engaging your suppliers, your policymakers, your customers, your investors in that transition? And then on the outcomes, which is the other half of the assessment, we're looking here more at actually how circular are you today. So this is looking at your material flows, so how you're procuring materials in and what's happening to them when they go out of your business, how you're designing your products and services, and if you're doing so along the principles of the circular economy, if you're procuring renewable energy and possibly producing it as well, as a financial institution, how are you funding circular economy initiatives and companies? And then finally, do you have plans in place for your plant, property, and equipment assets, which are longer term assets that are going to be part of your business for a long time? What's going to happen to those at the end of their life? So that's kind of a snapshot of your scorecard. Then to the right of that, you can see a lot of text, which we don't have to go through now, but that's basically the analyst commentary. And for companies with revenues over $1 billion US, someone from our data and metrics team will provide a bespoke commentary there, which goes a little bit more into their assessment and kind of suggests where they can make improvements going forward. And then on the bottom, you have something that says score chart and industry benchmark. So currently we don't have enough data for most industries yet to do industry level benchmarking because we want it to be anonymized, but this is where you would see how your score compares to other companies of your size in your industry.
And that's a really key point, right? It's about comparing those within your own industry, comparing apples and apples rather than apples and pears.
Exactly, yeah.
So I'm going to come to Marianne in a moment, but I think just while we've got Nikki, we might just switch straight to the Brambles one just to talk, because there are some subtle differences, and then have a bit of a conversation with the pair of you around the process and how you found it. So I'm going to try and swap over now. So I'll stop sharing and I'll bring the other one up. Now, the first thing for me, Nikki, is this one is a different color. Is there, what's different here?
So this scorecard, which is DS Smith's scorecard, was from the beta test that we did before we launched version 1. So this is a slightly different version. It's not the current version of Circulytics. Some of the questions will have changed slightly and improved upon. So that's why it looks not as fabulous as the other one. But it's essentially the same layout, the same idea.
Fabulous.
You have your overall score, your score. Sorry, I didn't mention actually before, the score history is where you will see your history year on year. And really the hope and aim is that companies will use Circulytics on an annual basis so that they can measure which direction they're going in. And that's what you'll see there. And then similarly, you have the scorecard, the commentary, and the benchmarking.
Excellent. So I'm going to bring Marianne and Sam in there, because obviously we've been talking about you, but it's good to get some feedback. Marianne, starting with you then. So why was this important for Brambles?
It was super important for Brambles because, as you were saying earlier, there are many indicators and measurement systems that exist. But when it comes to measuring environmental impact for different scopes, applications, and use, and the same goes with CSR, by the way, but circularity is a much broader topic by essence, because there are 3 axes: regenerate natural systems, design out waste and pollution, and keep products and materials in use. So it logically includes more parameters or give them different weighting to existing ones. And with the decarbonization objective by 2050, they demand circular economy as well as a means to reach this target. So we were left with our best guesses really of what circularity precisely entails. And we needed an upgrade, a set of universally agreed indicators that were also encompassing, as Nikki was saying, other rating or rankings systems that existed, not to overlap and to put companies on the spot to do so many evaluations and assessments. So we needed more, but we needed consistency also of existing measurement system. So we volunteered to take part in this initiative at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation to contribute to this effort of designing an overarching framework that would include different types of companies, regardless the sector or the activities they actually perform. And we also, it was important for us to volunteer to pilot it and to get more companies also using it, so that we can get the rich aspect of this benchmarking diagram that you were talking about.
Excellent. Thanks, Marianne. Sam, turning to you then and DS Smith, was it a similar sort of story? Were there other elements in there around it?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I would agree with certainly everything Marianne said. I think one of the things that we're conscious of is as you said at the top of the webinar, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And if you can't manage it, you can't improve it. And I often think that in the sustainability related world, we're very good at, as an industry of making concepts that people don't really understand. And circular economy, on the face of it, is exactly that. So one of the things that was really important to us, and it's been part of the group that put it together, was making the circular economy make sense for people within the organization, so that you can break it down and make it tangible and actionable. So you know, this is what procurement can do to support. This is what human resources can do to contribute. Because only when you do that, you speak the language of the people you're trying to engage, and then you actually get the engagement. Otherwise, you're just more noise in busy lives.
So it's almost being able to humanize this very kind of high level concept into actually what does it mean to the guys and girls on the shop floor, the kind of project managers, actually what does it mean to their day-to-day work?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and absolutely taking it down from a kind of corporate level, absolutely right down to the shop floor level. One of the things we're always conscious of when it comes to our broad internal sustainability work is the old anecdote that JFK tells about the cleaner in Cape Canaveral putting the man on the moon. And if we want to be leaders in the circular economy, then we have to make 29,000 people realize how they can contribute, and not just a few sitting in fancy offices.
Yeah, I guess that's really important, isn't it? It's about again, back to the idea of enablers. What are the enabling conditions? I mean, Marianne, from you, Sam talks very clearly there about challenges around the organization understanding what it needs to do. Have you any other sort of challenges that you face at Brambles when you look through a circular economic lens?
Well, we have a challenge ahead of us that is, I would say, quite big, which is moving from reducing and starting to be zero waste to landfill, or 100% lumber certified from forest certified and chain of custody, and obviously greenhouse gas emissions. We've started this big journey to a net positive and regenerative organization by 2025. So moving from a better to a net positive regenerative implies an extension of the scope, new strategy and tactics deployed, which is keeping everybody in the organization very busy, because it's really shifting from the notion of supply chains to proper value networks, which is a big change. And net regenerative means a broader topic. It means planet positive, community positive, business positive. It encompasses supply chain, workplace, collaborations as well. So this means that we need also to be working with our ecosystem stakeholders and even beyond to set up full solutions, because today they're not fully set answers to those blue sky goals. But anyway, we need to get there. So that's the challenge that we have right now. That is externally, I would say, focused. Of course, we still focus on us and our activities and improving them. But really now it's time to open, and how are we going to reach this decarbonated supply chain that is zero waste, and that is really zero waste and regenerative. So on how we're going to do it, basically.
So it's clear that the challenge is really obvious, or the challenges are really easy to point to. I think the thread so far has been about quantifying that challenge, and therefore quantifying where you need to apply effort and where you need to focus your efforts. With that then, and sticking with you just for a moment, Marianne, how have you found that something like Circulytics helps this?
Well, it helped us in, let's say that it helped us understanding what was the gap between what we had set up before. So some years ago, we have modeled our business activities and processes, we standardized them globally, and we deployed our range of global IT systems to monitor them electronically. So this helped us in running different types of ratings, scorecards and ratings. But because our target is to continuously increase the circularity of our business and making the circle of our share and reuse model stronger, before Circulytics, we had to put in place, I would say, our own measurement systems of circularity, using a bit about what was existing. And once we have run a Circulytics, first, the thing that we have understood from the comparison is that we were close to have understood what it was. But in Circulytics, more than anything else, what we found is an internal measurement system that is helping us to track our progress and the impact of our new actions that we are undertaking.
Excellent, thank you. And turning to you, Sam, in a similar sort of vein, then, how does Circulytics help this? But also, as well, is there anything that you've learned through going through the process, or DS Smith has learned through going through the process, that surprised you, that you weren't expecting to identify?
Yeah, and I think there's one really big one which did surprise us. I think I mentioned at the beginning that we have a heavily integrated business model. We make cardboard boxes, pulp and paper packaging, which is the most recycled material. We collect through our recycling division, and we're involved in the recycling of more than we put on the market. We make recycled papers, which makes our own packaging again. So we have this, and for a number of years have had this inherently circular business model. And at the risk of sounding like my dad, I mean, we've been talking about circular economy since before it was cool to talk about circular economy, and closed loop and supply cycles and all these kind of zeitgeisty phrases now that are almost covering dust in DS Smith. We've been talking about them for so long, which is fantastic. But I think because of that, we almost took it for granted. The way we did things was almost a given. And so when we did the assessment, we were really surprised that we didn't get we got a lower than expected grading for the people category. And in there, I think Nikki talked about the sort of deliberateness of roles and responsibilities and communication, training and development. And we probably hadn't got such strong credentials in those areas because it was just inherent in what people did and the way they worked. And it was kind of embedded in the organization as standard. And so we probably hadn't gone through the process of documenting that, and like sort of the exam technique people talk about, show your workings out. We possibly haven't done that, and so I think our scorecard is from October when we did the beta version. Since then, we've done a huge amount of work as a strategic partner of the foundation, and so we are in fact on Wednesday this week with Joe Isles from your design team launching our set of circular design principles, which is it kind of is what it says, to be honest, but we're launching those and doing a huge amount of work to get our 700 designers trained in the circular economy, to make sure they're the best designers there are. And then equally on other training programs, we've taken advantage of some of the fantastic resources available from the foundation to embed circular economy thinking in our leadership development programs, in our graduate development programs, and right across the organisation, really. So it's helped us to understand our gaps, and then we've worked with you guys to plug them.
I think that's quite a powerful message there, actually. As you say, you're talking about the kind of paper industry, and for a long, I think for a long time, the narrative around recycled paper and, as you say, products made from previous products over and over again has been the norm. But I like that sentiment around, we thought we'd got this right. We thought we got this now down. So actually, going through the process, it did allow you to identify some blind spots that then allow you to kind of work on it. And as you say, the scorecard was in October of last year. A lot has changed at DS Smith, but a lot has changed generally since then. But I think that's a really nice sentiment around how it kind of supported you in that regard. I guess if we turn for a minute then about actually going through the process of filling out the information required. Coming back to you, Marianne, how did you find going through the Circulytics process as an organisation?
Well, to be fair, our global reporting team have been extensively trained and used to to prepare the data, to collect the data. And as I was saying earlier, we have automated a series of the data that was actually required for Circulytics. So it was not difficult from their perspective to have access to this data in terms of just filling it. In terms of findings, of course, it was a different story. It was very interesting.
And can you elaborate a little bit on how you know, like you say, finding it, like were there any processes that you needed to change? You already obviously had that level of understanding around reporting, but was there anything sort of surprising that came from that?
Oh, surprises, yes, we had surprises. Clearly, it really uncovered some, I would say, some topics that we did not anticipate to be as important in our journey to become regenerative, net positive and regenerative, such as water and energy. Energy we knew, but water we thought, because we're mostly using wood for our pallets, we were thinking that the impact would not be as big as the impact of lumber, but in fact it is. So those are precious insights that we're going to carry over in our 2025 objectives. And I guess it has been also teaching us is giving us the confirmation that the foundation that we had set was robust. Because as I was saying earlier, we're doing at our best guesses, and it's important to understand where you are before you actually embark your ecosystem into this journey of net positive and regenerative, which is really a big step forward.
Excellent. Coming back to you then, Sam, I guess similar sort of question around, you know, how with an organization the size of DS Smith, you mentioned before, all those employees, how challenging was it to engage with the grabbing that data for the tool?
I think we're in a fortunate position, to be honest, on that, in that I think someone mentioned earlier that the growth of sustainability and ESG reporting, and so we do a huge amount of that already, and so we're confident that we've got pretty sophisticated processes and software and things in place to make sure we've got the data that we needed. So we were lucky that we didn't have to do a huge amount. The challenge for me on the completion entry side of things was less about the data and more about, there are a number of questions that are, you know, qualitative, and so there's always that element of you know, do you just go for the next boxed up because you know you want to get an ever so slightly better score? And I know that's a temptation for everyone, because everyone's showing these things to their senior executives, and they want to show that the 8-year-old kids add a plus instead of a minus to their school reports and take them home for mum and dad so that they get some more sweets. And I don't think that ever changes. So we resisted the temptation, because I think you have to look at this as a tool, and if you just game it, if you game the system, and then you're doing yourself a disservice as a professional person, because you're kind of removing your business case to go and get things done in your organization, but you're also invalidating any benchmarks or industry comparisons or anything like that. So that was, I think that's a difference. So our challenge in submission was less on the quantitative side and more on the qualitative side. But I would just encourage anyone who's listening and about to participate to be totally honest, so you get the most out of it.
I guess there's also a point here for me as well around, this is not a single point in time and forget about it. You can't rest on your laurels on that score for the rest of time. There's going to be a progressive 12 monthly, 24 monthly, whatever it might be, update, and you're going to want to be seeing progression. So if you do gamify and come in at an A+, you know, you've almost got to fiddle the numbers forevermore, or, you know, you've got it, there is something about that transparency and honesty, and through the period of time, allowing to see progression and change. And we know that at the moment there are only, you know, there are impossible choices in an imperfect system. So there are going to be some things that every organization can do straight away, and there's lots of things that, you know, the system needs to shift, the system needs to change, whether that be policy, whether that be the consumer, whatever it might be. So I think, yeah, it's a fair point. You could get an A star this time, but you're probably setting yourself up to fail in the second or third cycle, or at least, well, definitely found out as well. So we've talked a lot about how it is sort of affected your organization or the processes of the organization, but what about as individuals? Both of you, hold this torch a little bit for your respective organizations. With regards to, and coming back to you again, Sam, to start with regards to the work that you personally do in DS Smith, has that changed as a result of now having an opportunity to look under the hood of the entire DS Smith infrastructure?
I think that I mentioned, Joe, we use a lot of these assessments, Joe. We do CDP, Sustainalytics, and FTSE for Good, and a whole range of the benchmarks that people will be familiar with. And we do the same with those. You know, we try to use them as a tool. They are sort of insight by proxy from customers and investors and other financial institutions as to the things that they're looking for companies like DS Smith to be addressing. So we treat Sustainalytics in exactly the same way. It's a tool for us, as you say, to get under the hood. But it's what really stood out for us is that it's to get under the hood of something very, very specific, and something that I think everyone is grappling with to try and make it make sense in their own organisation. So we've broken it apart. We've taken some time before we do our next submission, which will probably try and leave 12-month gaps, as you say, because that gives us a fair time to develop an action plan, engage audiences internally, implement the action plan, and it's the sort of plan, do, check, act sort of process that anyone who's done an ISO system will be familiar with. So in that sense, yeah, it has been and continues to be a really, really helpful tool. And I say it's surprised us, the areas that it's shone a light on, but having that light shone has enabled us to get the engagement to do things like develop and launch circular design principles, to roll out training programs where without any insight, you haven't really got any evidence, and everyone's trying to make decisions based on data as opposed to feeling. So it's not perfect, but it's given us data where we didn't have any, which is really, really helpful.
Great stuff. And to you then, Marianne, has it changed any of your personal approaches?
I think, well, having confidence on the fact that the foundations that you've built are actually robust is very reassuring. That's the first thing. So I think this is what it is. It's reassuring the entire company who've been embracing the strategy and the changes of habits and ways of working, that it was the right thing to do, and understanding also that we are in the good direction to our net positive and regenerative journey is also very strong. Calling out the focus that needs to be brought on regenerative, and the need to co-design basically with different stakeholders the regenerative option, because there's nothing on the shelf yet that is significant, is super, I would say, super enlightening for us, clearly. And finally, for the company, a lot of pride of those robust foundations.
Excellent. So the questions have been coming in thick and fast whilst we've been talking, as you'd expect. Quite a few of them are quite technical, so I'm going to bring Nikki back in as well now before we head over to the questions. But just before we do that, Nikki, any sort of comments or reflections on the discussion we've just had? That's not a loaded question, but whilst you've been sort of listening there, anything you wanted to pick up on?
I think they're both really great examples of how you can draw insights from using Circulytics as an assessment. I think the data largely exists and is there already, but Circulytics kind of provides a package and framework to bring that data together and draw insights out of the data. And I think that's the really powerful point of it. And it's really encouraging to see from both Marianne and Sam that it was useful in doing that, and they identified certain areas that they hadn't expected to from doing the assessment.
Excellent, thanks. So we're going to move on to the questions from the audience now. So remember, if you want to ask Marianne, Sam or Nikki any questions, you've got to put it in the Q&A. I've seen a couple come into the chat, but they're not going to get captured. So put them in the Q&A, please. But we do already have a host of questions coming. So I'm going to come to you first, Nikki, actually. And the first question here, and I'll come to Marianne and Sam afterwards, and we've kind of touched on it already, but how do we make sure the data that's provided is true? I mean, we can't get away from this idea, and Sam brought it up just now around, you know, marking your own homework. Are you just greenwashing? How does the foundation make sure the data we're receiving is an accurate representation of what that organization is doing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a question we get on any kind of webinar or event that we do, and validly so. The data that's submitted is not validated by the foundation simply due to capacity constraints. We're a team of 5 people, and we've got a lot coming in. So we're just kind of unable to do that at this point. But I think as a tool, as I said, Circulytics is really about drawing insights for your business and understanding what circular economy means for you as a business. So there is, first of all, this incentive for companies to put good data in so that they get an accurate result and snapshot out through Circulytics. Then for companies that are in our network or have revenues over $1 billion annually, we provide this analyst commentary, which I showed on the scorecard earlier. And that does warrant a bit of a deeper dive. So we're going through the data submitted through the assessment. We're not necessarily validating it to the extent that a third party would, but we need to understand exactly how the company has responded to the questions so that we can give some actual useful insights in the commentary. And then thirdly, if companies do choose to disclose their score, we do then go and recheck their submission to make sure that at least all the indicators are properly interpreted and the right types of data are used. And if companies disclose, they also need to contact us first legally to align on messaging. So they have to contextualize their score in terms of what they've done to achieve the score and also what they'll do to make it better. So it's not just we are certified A by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. That's not the kind of messaging behind it. It's an indicator of where the company is today in terms of their circular economy performance. And it needs to be contextualized because just the letter doesn't really mean that much on its own.
So here's what what's sort of coming across there is that, you know, it's only as good as the data you put in, and accuracy and brevity is best, but also the score alone is part of the process. It's not just about generating a high mark. It's actually, as you say, then the foundation working with those organizations around where they need to go next, what they need to do next, that continuity of the journey around that. And that's really interesting to do.
And we do also, for each of the indicator questions, we ask for supporting documents and references to where companies have found that data. So that allows a level of sense checking in and of itself, but it's not a requirement to complete the assessment.
I think as well for me, there's also that point around it allows us, the foundation, to potentially then identify where the deltas, where the gaps are, the trends, and then allows us to generate content or effort to help organizations with that part as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great stuff. Turning to you then, Sam. Okay, so another question that's come in here is, what benefit then does DS Smith get from disclosing its score?
Oh, good question. Well, I think for us, there's two things. One thing touches on the previous point is we haven't communicated publicly before today our score. I know that many organisations will be looking at this to achieve some marketing benefit or position, which I think is sustainability people. We know that's part of the game. So I'm sure there's an element to that. I think from our side, first and foremost, it's the circular economy. It's about money at the end of the day. It's about finding a way to operate that is for the long term, and is about trying to find resource efficiencies and ways that are going to set up DS Smith to succeed in the market in the long term, and not just for the next couple of years. So we see this as something that's going to help drive our business performance. It's not just about getting a grade to put on the front of the sustainability report. This is about finding ways to work better, to work smarter, to work better with suppliers, to get more from them, to engage in better conversations with customers and partners, so we can put joint action plans together. We can start to talk a shared language, and we can find ways for our suppliers to help us with our objectives. We can find ways that we can help our customers with theirs, and so it's a tool that's going to help us achieve those things. It's not a sort of quick win. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Marianne, then another question that's coming for you around, we've talked already about this sort of 12-month cycle, and this is almost like a in the future question, but how often do you think Brambles is planning to do this process, to go through Circulytics?
The idea is to do it every year.
Yeah.
To really, I mean, at the pace of our financial years, where we have also our reporting that is running and our KPIs ready. Internally, the idea is to really track where we're doing some changes. So this is something that is interesting for us, to monitor special aspects of things we're putting in place, a bit like test, redesign, test, learn, redesign, test, learn, redesign. So that's really what we have in mind, so internally as a use.
Excellent, thank you. And just following on from that then, you mentioned there a little bit about KPIs. How did it complement your existing KPIs? And was there much that you had to change, or could you just, we spoke a little bit about this before, but could you just sort of cut and paste across?
I think there were two dimensions that were really interesting in Circulytics. The first one is the consistency with data that we're getting before, but grouped in different buckets, shall I say this, that gives a different picture. So you take all the elements, but you do not group them in the same order. And then at the end of the day, you realize that, when you put out energy and water, for instance, they're actually super key for regenerative, which is something that if you're monitoring in isolation, you're monitoring your scope, but you do not understand this notion of impact. So that's the first thing. The second thing is really, as Sam was saying, is this is not an end in itself. The importance of it is to understand the journey that you are undertaking and how well you're performing against your journey. So I think this is having the enablers also. Of course, if you're playing an objective and pragmatic evaluation, right? But that's the whole purpose of it. Otherwise, you're not getting any valid learnings out of it. I guess this is really where it's helping. It's understanding what you do from an input and output perspective, but the part of enablers to us was really, really interesting also to have. And this is not something that you find in the traditional ESGs or GRIs or systems. You find some part of it, but not as I would say, as broad as you have in Circulytics.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting.
So,
Nikki, I just want to bring you back in for a second if we can. Just also, so Marianne's point at the end there, but also to pick on something Sam said before about, it's the importance of the economy around it. Is there any ambition to connect it with financial metrics as an external facing tool? How does that sit with the thinking with Circulytics at the moment?
Yeah, so that's definitely something that we're thinking about longer term. We would love to be able to, we would love to incorporate some financial indicators in the tool, and then over time show through the data behind Circulytics how companies are decoupling their economic growth from resource extraction, if there are examples of that, and I'm sure there are. And at the moment, in terms of internal and external facing, disclosure is voluntary because we realize not everyone's there yet in terms of disclosure. A lot of companies are still understanding what the circular economy means for them. but it's definitely something that we want to encourage and the direction we want to move in, because that will be the real game changer when more big influential companies like Brambles and DS Smith start disclosing. And that's also when investors will start to become really interested.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point, and I'm reminded of a conversation I had this morning actually with an organization who'd said that some of their investors they've been doing research rounds, and some of their investors had been specifically looking for activities like this as a methodology for sound and resilient investment moving forward. So it'd be nice to see how that incorporates moving forward. Coming to you again then, Sam, and there's a couple of questions that have come in with this, and I want to bring Marianne in on it as well in a minute. How do you see your peers, your customers, your supply chain? How do you see the work around Circulytics and what DS Smith is doing at the moment can influence those other elements of your value chain?
Yeah, great question. I think that on suppliers, it's maybe a simpler answer. There's a question in the assessment around the extent to which you're engaging with suppliers and trying to have meaningful circular economy conversations, develop shared action plans, these kind of things. So anyone who was using this as a tool in the way we are would potentially get that as an action out the back end if they were to comb through and look for areas of improvement. So that's possibly a quick win. Obviously, it depends on having like-minded suppliers and people who are. I mean, the more organisations that do this, the better, because then you can have that shared conversation and approach things in the same way. If one of your actions is to engage with your suppliers, chances are your suppliers have an action to engage with the customers. So if you can meet in the middle like that, then it's perfect. From a customer point of view, I think I mentioned earlier on around this often being some stuff that DS Smith has kind of taken for granted, in that we've been driving for circularity for a number of years. We've been trying to do more with less. We've been trying to use packaging to protect products and avoid damage and take lorries off the road and replace plastics, and it's just what we do every single day. I guess it's added a sense of greater urgency to those things, or it's raised them up the agenda, or that they've become more strategic things to think about, possibly as a it's not an overnight reaction. We got B+ in Circulytics. Let's start talking to some of the biggest brands in the world about how we can reduce their plastics. We're doing that anyway, but it's kind of just building that critical mass in the direction that everyone sits up and listens, from the chief executive down to the person on the shop floor. So it's just another thing adding to the sort of chorus of voices in one direction. Yeah,
and I guess the longer that chorus and the louder that chorus gets, it becomes less of a push and more of a pull then with your wider sort of supply chains. But again, like you say, there has to be a latency around how much time that takes.
And people know what to pull for as well, James. Sorry, people know what to pull for, because we've had conversations with people internally before about developing circular economy action plans with suppliers, and you sort of go, well, where do I start? But this breaks it down, and it breaks it down. You go, all right, we'll talk about innovation, or we'll talk about training, and you go, okay, well, we can start to have actions now, which I think is the really key thing.
Great stuff. Marianne, Sam, we're unfortunately running out of time this afternoon. That last 56 minutes has disappeared in a flash. But thank you to both of you. Thank you both to DS Smith and to Brambles for sharing your scorecards with us this afternoon. It certainly stimulated quite a lot of questions and conversation. I hope, if you're happy, we've got so many more questions still there. What we might do is bundle them up and send them to you, the ones that are specific. And if you get some time, maybe we can sort of gather the answers on that and create a frequently asked question. But thank you to both of you. Thank you this afternoon. I just want to close out with Nikki, with a couple of last sort of questions, Nikki. So what's next, right? We've already heard that there's been the beta version into version 1, and then what's coming next with Circulytics, and also where can people find out more information about it?
Yeah, so version 2 is what's coming next. I think probably the day after we launched version 1, we started on version 2, and we're really improving the indicators, making it more intuitive and user-friendly. We've also we're adding in indicators on water and toxicity in version 2. So that will be launched in October of this year, and version 1 will be closing the end of August. So if you do want to do version 1, you need to get your submissions in soon. Then we're also automating the back end of Circulytics to make it a lot more user-friendly and easy to process. We're doing some translations of Circulytics into Chinese, Portuguese, and Spanish, and that's being spearheaded by our regional teams in those areas. And also on an annual basis, we'll be doing kind of a statistical yearbook from the anonymized data that we gather from Circulytics submissions. So that's something we'll be doing towards the end of the year. And more future gazing than that, we're really starting to look into how we can bring in embodied emissions. There's this really important link between circular economy and emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. So we'd like to kind of have an indication how circular economy initiatives have helped companies progress towards their emission reduction targets and the Sustainable Development Goals, and really link all of those things up. And your second question, you can find out hopefully everything you need to know at circulytics.com. There's all of the indicator questions free to download, the definitions, the methodology, and some other resources there as well.
Nikki, it sounds like you're going to need more than 5 people in the team moving forward with that level of ambition. Nikki, Sam, Marianne, thank you very much. Thank you to everyone watching at home. Thank you for the questions and for the provocations. Lots of accolades coming through on the chat. You can find it at circulytics.com, as Nikki mentioned. The recording of today will be available. And as ever, you can reach us at the foundation if you have any follow-up conversations or want to pick up the dialogue. Thank you very much for watching, and look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye-bye.